Well, welcome to Crosswinds Online. My name's Andrea Coli. I'm one of the pastors here. And if you're joining us for the first time, this is a great time to jump in because we're launching a new series called Nothing But Good News: the Gospel, Jesus, and the 6 things we build our hope on. Lately, we have been hearing a lot of bad news and even worse news. And so we figure it's pretty good to maybe hear some good news for a change. But the reason that we're doing a series like this isn't just to counteract all the bad news. It's bigger than that. Each week in this series, we will explore one part of the gospel. And week by week, as we link these pieces together, we'll have a clearer understanding of what Jesus has done for us and why his work on our behalf is the best news of all. So if you are here exploring faith for the first time, this series is going to be really foundational for you. If you're someone who has already grown deep in your faith, this series is going to be important as well because maybe you need some hope right now. And as we look at these 6 things, it will nurture and build up the hope that you have. This series is an important one, and we are so looking forward to sharing it with you. But first, let me fill you in on a few things. Today is Pastor Elder Prayer, which means that if you want somebody to come alongside you and just bring encouragement or just pray with you, be with you, we would love to do that through prayer. You can reach out through the email or through the hotline, and it's a chance for us, while we're separated, to still be together. So please let us know. I also want to tell you about Lead Bold. Lead Bold is a leadership community for women in ministry. And last year, we had our very first conference where a couple hundred women in ministry gathered. And I know that some of you were part of that. Maybe you lead a group of volunteers, or maybe you lead a small group. And I want to ask you to consider coming to our 2nd annual Lead Bold conference. Of course, we've moved it to online, but we are committed to making it significant and engaging for you. Check out our website at leadingbold.org. Now last, we want to ask you to consider giving to Crosswinds this week. You know that our whole ministry here is through your support, through giving. And so we just ask that as you consider what this ministry is and the way that you can support it tangibly, that you would consider donating to Crosswinds this week. Well, we're doing something a little bit different for this series where we're going to actually end with worship. And the reason for that is because worship is meant to be a response to what God is stirring up in you. So a little bit later in our service today, you'll have a chance to do that, to be able to focus in on what God is stirring up in you. But our band does have something for you, because before you can begin to really embrace the good news, sometimes you have to start with thinking about what it is to be alone.
No, I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been. Hanging on the promises and songs of yesterday, and I've made up my mind. I ain't wasting no more time, though I keep searching for an answer. I never seem to find what I'm looking for. Oh Lord, I pray you give me strength to carry on, 'cause I know what it means to walk along the lonely street of dreams. Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone. And I've made up my mind. I ain't wasting no more time. Just another heart in need of rescue, waiting on love's sweet charity. And I'm gonna hold on for the rest of my days, 'cause I know what it means to walk along the lonely street of dreams. Oh, here I go again on my own, walking down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone. And I've made up my mind. I ain't wasting no more time. Here I go again. Here I go again. Oh, here I go again. And I've made up my mind. Oh, I ain't wasting no more time. Oh, and here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone. And I've made up my mind. Oh, I promise I ain't wasting no more time. I ain't wasting no more time. I ain't wasting no more time. Here I go again. And here I go again.
The good news that I got during quarantine.
During quarantine?
The good news that I found out during quarantine was
my family was surprising me with a birthday parade with some of our closest family and friends.
I was worried about my 3 children and my 11 grandchildren, but the good news that I can report is everybody is healthy and happy.
Even though our daughter had to cancel the wedding we had planned for over a year, she decided that it was more important to be married than to wait, and was married in a small, intimate ceremony with just parents.
Well, I was at Target a couple weeks ago, and the shelves were full of TP. I finally picked up my first roll since shelter in place. I'm good to go.
my husband is a cancer survivor. I'm so thankful.
The good news that I got during quarantine was that my brother and sister-in-law got a puppy, and it is adorable.
The good news that I found out during quarantine was that our family was still able to go on vacation.
My daughter flew to Charleston to see her dad get married, and after being on a ton of different flights and in a bunch of different airports, she got home, quarantined with me, and by day 14, I knew she was healthy and safe. Best news ever.
During quarantine, the good news I found out was that labor was over. Now we're a family of 5.
Well, good news. I think we could all use more good news. Back in the early 1980s in Atlanta, there was this local television network with their local news department that felt kind of the same way. Channel 11 News in Atlanta, in an effort to help the people of Georgia associate their coverage with good news, they decided to put out a commercial called Hello Atlanta, and it had kind of a cheesy jingle. There were birds chirping in the background. Here's what the lines to the jingle were. There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except in Georgia. I taste 1,000 yesterdays. I still love the magic ways of Atlanta. And the idea behind the commercial, it was meant to inspire nostalgia and loyalty, and it was really meant to counter all the city's negative images that you would see on the news every night. In fact, people who remember it today speak pretty fondly of this commercial's ability to make you feel good and have some pride about your unique town. Like, you know, with all the bad news going on, there's good news. We live in the most unique town in the world. And this song became kind of an anthem for Atlanta. Well, a few years ago, Ira Glass, on his radio program, This American Life, he interviewed people from Atlanta who remembered the song. And he played it for them, and they reminisced about how proud it made them feel about their unique town. And then he burst their bubble when he played them another song called Hello, Calgary. And the lyrics went like this. There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except in Calgary. I taste 1,000 yesterdays. I still love the magic ways of Calgary. And it turned out this good news commercial about your unique town, it was put out in 167 different cities worldwide by news stations looking to create a good news campaign, and then they would substitute Calgary or Milwaukee or Pittsburgh or Cleveland, and basically they would sing the same song. 167 news departments in different cities, all pretending that they are unique, but in fact the good news was a little bit embellished or a little bit copycat. Well, isn't it crazy how often the good news in our world, we find out later, isn't as good as we thought, or it doesn't reflect what's true? Maybe it even ends up letting us down. Well, I have some good news for you that's legitimate, that is true, that is unique, and it's in this series that we're about to start. For centuries, people have been calling the story associated with Jesus and Christianity good news. Have you heard that before? People call it the good news. Well, I was thinking about this, and I don't know how thorough an explanation anyone ever really gives as to why it's so good. Now, I say that as a pastor. I have been preaching and explaining the good news for over 25 years, but I don't know how often I get to do it completely. Even me, when I preach the good news, I've got to fit it into like 30 minutes, or sometimes less. Like sometimes I have to tag it on the end of a sermon on parenting, or what the Bible has to say about you forgiving people who hurt you. And lately I've been wondering, this news is so good, and you and our world need it so much. I've been wondering, maybe it's worth spending some more concentrated time making sure that you get it. Because this good news is something that every single person in this world needs, and this good news affects every area of your life. And I would go so far as to say, if you've not heard or understood this news, then this is the good news that you've been waiting for. Now, as I say that, I wonder if some of you have heard the good news, but you don't know how to share it. If your kids or your friends or your neighbors were to ask you, hey, what's the good news? Or let's be honest, they probably wouldn't ask it that way. They might ask, why do you find Jesus so meaningful? Or why have you chosen this religion over a different one? Or maybe, what's Christianity all about? Okay, I would guess there are many of you watching who feel like you can't quite explain the good news yourself. You know that you know the good news. You know it enough to have made Jesus a big part of your life, but you don't know how you would share it or what the core pieces of the good news are. Maybe you're like some friends of mine who are worried that they would miss important parts of the story if they tried to explain it to somebody, that you would leave important parts of the good news out. And so because of that, what I've decided to do, I want to lay out 6 things that the good news is. 6 consecutive things, one at a time, 6 videos in a row. And to help you remember it, we're going to use a word that you've probably heard before, the word gospel, which I realize is not the most used word in our modern culture. But it's worth using for this 6-video explanation because the word gospel, it simply means good news. It's actually an Old English word, and it means good spell. Spell means story, so it's good story. But this is more than a good story. It's good news, because this is the story of God in you. Anyway, we're going to use the word gospel with these 6 videos because there are 6 letters in it, G-O-S-P-E-L, and we're going to use it as an acrostic to help you remember these 6 things. Like I said, I wonder if many of us worry that if we were to try and communicate the good news, we would miss parts. Well, when we're done, you're going to be able to think G-O-S-P-E-L and remember 6 things because you remember that word gospel. Now, we're going to make these messages pretty short, about 15, 20 minutes each, and we're going to dive deeply into 6 consecutive concepts that make up the good news. And I'll just say again, this is news every single person ought to hear. They ought to have shared with them. They ought to understand. It is something you need. It's something that changes everything. And the first concept of the 6 revolves around that letter G. To jump into this, let me use a little bit of an object lesson. A couple of years ago, I was with this group of pastors and leaders, about 25 of us, and somebody was leading us in our own spiritual development, and they stood in front of us with 2 chairs, kind of like the ones I've got in front of me right now. And they asked, if you imagine yourself sitting in one of these chairs, and if God is in the other chair, where are you in relation to each other? If God is sitting in one chair, you're sitting in the other, how would you arrange these chairs to describe your relationship? It was fascinating to think about. Maybe as I walk you through this, you'll think about how you would have answered that question. One person got up and they took the chairs and they arranged them seat to seat, as if he and God were sitting directly across from each other's faces, looking each other in the eye. Another person, they took the chairs and they turned them over, not in an orderly way, but like somebody just knocked some chairs over in a bar fight sort of way. And I think what she was expressing was that she and God were in the thick of a pretty rough conflict right then. Somebody else took one chair, they put it on top of the other chair as if it was being carried. It was a footprints in the sand moment. But the one that really got me, someone else took the God chair and they opened the door to the room that we were in, and they walked out, and they put that chair outside, right outside the glass door where we could all see it. And then they came back in and they explained that their experience, at least lately, had been that God was distant, that he was detached, he was disinterested. They were here, and God was somewhere far away doing his own thing. I think for many of us, that's our experience. We believe in God, some kind of higher power. We believe he's out there somewhere, but we're not sure how interested he is in us. Or if he is interested, maybe you think he's interested for all the wrong reasons. Maybe you think God is mostly interested in your screw-ups, what you do wrong. You would set the chairs like God is off to the side watching you like a yard duty person on an elementary school playground, hovering, watching, ready to judge you when you cross a line. Or maybe you feel like you've crossed so many lines that your chairs are like this. God has turned away from you. He's facing the other direction like he's fed up with you. He's given you enough chances. He's done. And all of this begs a question, all these different ideas of how we are with God. And this question is where the good news starts. The question is, how would God want these chairs to be arranged? Like, when God created you, what was he hoping for? What was his intention for you and him? And here's what I believe. My suspicion is that somewhere inside you, that question is getting asked. You know, most of us have this little voice inside our head asking really important, profound questions like that. And some of them are just shower thoughts. You know what I mean when I say shower thoughts? Things you only think of in the shower that are kind of unimportant. Like here, the object of golf is to play the least amount of golf. That's a shower thought. Or if humans could fly, we would consider it exercise and never do it. Sometimes the voice just makes us think odd things, but sometimes it asks very profound questions like, what was God hoping for in creating you and me? And what I've noticed, at least with me, is the more difficult the question, the more I drown that voice out. I use Netflix, I'll use Instagram. I don't sit still long enough in the silence to let that voice get loud. But when we do, those kinds of questions get asked. When God created you, what was he hoping for? What was his thought for you and him? Now, if you don't know the answer to that question, things can get tough. Life can be difficult, walking around not knowing. But if you have the wrong answer to that question, it can be even worse. Like, if you think his intention, his hope for him and you was for him to be a cosmic policeman that makes sure you follow all the rules, or that he created you just so that he could judge you, all right, you're likely to feel pretty alone when it comes to you and God. And if that's your understanding of what God was hoping for, you might prefer to be alone, keep him away, and that is not good news. If you're somebody who thinks his intention for you and him was that you're like an art project, that we're just here because we're one more thing he put in this world, but he got bored with you and he moved on to other things, well, that's going to leave you feeling pretty distant from God as well. Also, not good news. What I'm saying is the wrong answer to that question, what was God's intention for you and him, it'll mess you up, and it'll actually keep you from understanding the good news. So let's answer the question correctly right away. And here is the first piece of good news, the first thing in our 6 things. G, God created you to be with him. God created you. His intention for you and him was to be with each other. He is not a distant God who has no interest in you. He's not a yard duty worker at recess whose job it is to blow a whistle when you do something wrong and get you in trouble. He knows you. He is fascinated by you. He cares deeply about you. He knows you by name. And what is equally as important as all that, he made you to know him too, to be with him. The Bible begins with this story that we call the creation story, and you may have all sorts of questions about its accuracy, its science. Was the world created in 6 literal days? Did we evolve? It would be way off topic for me to walk you through the different understandings that people have on that today. And so you know, Christians disagree on what to do with the events in the creation story, and that's okay. It's actually not essential that we agree on how the world was created, but what we do agree on is the point of the creation story, why it's in the Bible. It's not there to tell us how God created, it's to tell us that he created. And in the story, it says something really interesting. This is in Genesis 1. It says in verse 26, "Let us make human beings in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over the creatures that move along the ground." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. I think one of the things that is so important in the creation story is this idea right here, that God created you to be like him. You were created in his image. And this means so many things. It means that you're a very special person. You have potential and strength and thoughts and feelings and a soul. You have significance and dignity and worth, and you're important, but it also means you were created like him so that you could be in a relationship with him. If he didn't care about a relationship with you, he would have created you differently. He didn't create you so that he could turn his back on you or abandon you or watch you from a distance. Thought went into you. And he created you like himself so that he could be with you. Later in the Bible, in this book called Jeremiah, we learn something really intimate about God. God says, if you're going to brag about anything, boast about anything, it shouldn't be your own wisdom or your strength or your possessions. It should be that you know God, you know him. Later in Jeremiah, God says something incredibly important. I'm going to fill the screen with this because I want you to see it real clearly. God says, I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. You were made in God's image, and you were made with a heart to know the God of the universe. He created you that way, and you read these verses, and it becomes real obvious that just like there is something in you that longs to be known by the people that you love, God values being known by you. God is not distant. He has not turned his back. He's not throwing his chair on the floor. He's wanting to put his chair right next to yours. His intention for you and him was to be with each other. Now, what I'm describing to you right now, is heaven. You and God with each other. Real quick, there are all sorts of understandings about what heaven is like out there. And just so you know, that's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about today. But out of all the understandings of what heaven is like or will be like, at the very basic level, it's the idea of with. Heaven embodies the idea of us being with God. Now, when we get to the next concept in the good news, we're going to talk about why it's not like this right now. What might be keeping us from with, what gets in the way of with. But what you must know is that with was not just God's intention when he created human beings. With has always been the plan. Thousands of years after Genesis was written, hundreds of years after Jeremiah, who told us that God gave us a heart to know him, Jesus comes on the scene. In talking about heaven, he says, my Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to go there and prepare a place for you? And check this out. If I go prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. With was God's original intention. Something has gotten in the way, but with is still his intention. And this is the truth you need to know as we start this journey together of 6 things that explain the good news, 6 things that we can build our hope on. God created you to be with him, to know him like he knows you. And what that means is God's intention in creating you was relationship. And that knowing him is not about a formula, it's not about a test, it's not about you trying to achieve perfection or you fixing everything in your life. You don't have to convince God to take an interest in you, to be with you. That has been his plan all along. In whatever state, whatever place you find yourself in right now, his plan has not changed. God is not distant. He has not turned his back. He's not throwing his chair on the floor. He's wanting to put his chair right next to yours. And that is where the good news begins. Now, the question for you right now, before we move on to the second important thing, if God's chair is right here wanting to be with you, where is yours? Is it moving away from him? Is it in another room altogether? Is it possible that because you believe some wrong things about God's intention for you and him, that you might have rejected him because you've been worried that he's going to reject you? He didn't. He won't. God created you to be with him, and he knows you. He knows you by name. But before we go any further in the good news, you've got to decide whether you want to be with him. Now, there's a chance that some people, maybe well-meaning, maybe not, there's a chance that they've told you some things about God that might make you question whether you want to be with him. Now, my guess is nothing grieves him more than the way that many people have misrepresented him as distant, as disinterested, as detached, as hateful, as rejecting, as all of those ways that those chairs I showed you earlier might make him out to be. But I'm not asking you to consider whether you want to be with those representations of God. I am introducing you to the God who wants to be with you, is fascinated by you, knows you better than you know yourself, loves you, created you so that he could be with you. Where are you in relation to him? Are you ready to know him?
Well, like Chris just said, God wants to be with you, and he created you with that in mind. And maybe today that was really important for you to hear. We want to invite you to consider what your chairs look like, your God chair and your you chair. Where are they in relationship to each other, and where do you want them to be? Our team is going to sing and create some worship space for you to be thinking about that very thing, and maybe even talking with God about your chairs and how you feel about where they are. Take this time right now as you worship to listen to the band, listen to the words, let the lyrics sink in as you consider what being with God means to you.
sing this out. I will rejoice. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. The dark tried to hide you and steal you away. And death tried to